The Shahed drone has become one of Russia's most important weapons. Ever since Russia managed to secure its first few batches from Iran and later learned how to build Shaheds itself, it's been using them to hit Ukraine's cities and infrastructure hard. Shaheds are cheap, easy to launch, and with Russia now occupying about 19% of Ukraine, they can be launched from inside Ukraine itself. These Shaheds had to be dealt with. Ukraine just delivered a death blow to them. A Russian Frontline base used to store scores of Shahed drones was engulfed in a massive fireball as Ukraine strikes hard against the Shaheds on its own territory. That's according to the Kyiv Post, which reported on November 6th that Ukraine's unmanned systems forces have pulled off a strike that hit a major base used to store Russian drones located in Donetsk. That region is where the fighting in Ukraine is most intense, with Russia controlling about 75% of the oblast in a slow and grinding push that has lasted for as long as the Ukraine war has raged. Putin desperately wants Donetsk, and now that Russia occupies such a substantial amount of the oblast, it's using the territory it's captured to launch devastating drone strikes against the rest of Ukraine. Taking out the drones stored in Donetsk was a priority. Ukraine just did it. The commander of the country's unmanned systems forces, Robert Madyar Brovdy, was among the first to confirm the success of Ukraine's latest strike. He took to Telegram to provide some details, stating, "Developing this complex target took painstaking work over several months, assembled from small pieces. Last night it was executed with the appropriate strike assets of the SSO and missile troops." The Kyiv Post adds that Brovdy also claimed that the base Ukraine struck was used for storing, equipping and launching Shahed drones. Thanks to Ukraine, the base no longer exists, he adds. And there's footage that Brovdy claims proves it. A 17-second clip shared with his Telegram post shows a massive explosion taking place, followed by a thunderous crash that suggests Ukraine used something other than its drones for this assault. As fire and smoke rise from the sky, it's clear that Ukraine hit something big, something explosive. Brovdy says that it was a Shahed drone facility, though the Kyiv Post points out that it hasn't been able to independently verify the footage. Perhaps it won't need to. The size of the explosion alone might be proof enough. Another Telegram channel named Spy Dossier followed up with more details of how Ukraine pulled off this damaging strike. It claims that Ukraine used both drones and cruise missiles in the attack, though it doesn't specify which types. Based on the size of the explosion in Brovdy's video, it seems safe to assume that Ukraine's new FP2 drone may have been involved. That drone has been designed specifically to enable Ukraine to strike Russian positions in the deep rear behind the front lines, and it packs a 230-pound warhead that hits very hard. Ukraine has pulled off several attacks with this new drone in the last week alone, as you'll learn if you check out our video covering how Ukraine used the FP2 to brutally destroy one of Russia's elite drone units on its own territory. Militarny offers a few more details, though it also doesn't reveal which drones and missiles Ukraine used. It says that Ukraine's drones, whichever ones they may be, managed to achieve a 90% strike success rate, which is damning evidence that Russia's air defenses are either non-existent at some of its most crucial facilities or are incapable of dealing with the new weapons Ukraine is using to hit Russia in the deep rear. Ukraine clearly identified a vulnerability in Russia's Shahed storage base, and it took full advantage on the night leading into November 6th. And when we say full advantage, we really mean it. Russia lost far too many drones due to Ukraine's attack. In its report on the Ukrainian strike, United 24 Media says that the destroyed drone storage facility was a home to a staggering 1,000 Shaheds, or as the Russians call their version, Geran-2 drones. Additionally, the facility stored around 1,500 warheads, which would presumably be strapped to the drones that Russia launches against Ukraine from Donetsk. This is big because the sheer number of drones and warheads at the base suggests that Russia was gearing up for a massive aerial assault against Ukrainian cities that are within range of its Shaheds from Donetsk. Now those strikes aren't going to happen, and it may take weeks for Russia to transport more Shaheds into Donetsk to use for its planned strikes. So Ukraine bought itself a little breathing room during its overnight drone assault. However, the burning of the Shahed base is mirrored by the hole that Ukraine has just burned in the Russian pocketbook. In its report on Ukraine's strike, the Express estimates that the combined cost of the destroyed Shaheds and warheads amounts to about £60 million, which is roughly $78.8 million. Let's put those figures into context. In an article where it calculated the effectiveness of Russia's Shahed drone assaults on Ukraine, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, estimated that a Russian-made Shahed drone costs about $35,000 to build. Russia has been taking advantage of this low cost as it launched 14,700 of these drones at Ukraine between September 28, 2022 and December 28, 2024, CSIS added. Even with a less than 10% hit ratio, CSIS adds, The Shaheds are proving very cost-effective for Russia. However, they can only be cost-effective if they make it into the skies, and that's what Ukraine just prevented from happening. Destroying 1,000 of Russia's Shaheds at a unit cost of $35,000 amounts to a total of $3.5 million. If the Express figures are correct, that would mean that Russia somehow has about $75 million worth of warheads stored in the base. Something doesn't add up here, especially if those warheads were intended to be strapped to the Shaheds. It's possible that these warheads were instead intended for Russian missiles, which would up their cost considerably. Perhaps, though, this is speculation. There's no information about the type of warheads Ukraine may have destroyed. For what it's worth, the Express doesn't provide any evidence to back this number. However, other sources also suggest that Shaheds may cost more to build than CSIS claims. Defense Express, for instance, said in August that Russia is spending about $70,000 on each of its Shaheds. That would double the total for the 1,000 Shaheds stored at the base Ukraine struck, though it would still mean that the Express values the 1,500 warheads at over $70 million. Still, even if we disregard the Express's estimate, between $3.5 million and $7 million lost in a single strike will sting Russia. It's also worth noting that this number doesn't account for any costs related to transporting the Shaheds to the Donetsk facility that Ukraine just took out, nor does it account for whatever Russia is spending on storing and defending that facility. It's possible that adding these tangible costs could mean that the loss of 1,000 Shaheds alone has cost Russia closer to $10 million. The cost of the warheads is added on top, like a cherry on a burning sundae that Ukraine just shoved down Putin's throat. There is a caveat to all of this. The 1,000 Shaheds and 1,500 warheads are just what Russia is known to have stored at its Donetsk base. That doesn't necessarily mean that Ukraine managed to destroy all of them in its November strike. But even if all weren't taken out, it seems likely that Ukraine made a serious dent in Russia's Shahed stockpiles. How do we know? In a Facebook post, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said that there were more explosions at Russia's Donetsk facility than just those caused by Ukraine's drones and cruise missiles. According to objective control data, explosions and powerful secondary detonation were recorded on the site, the General Staff reported. This makes sense. A facility used to store warheads is naturally going to be prone to multiple explosions due to the very nature of the equipment stored there. It appears that Ukraine's drones and missiles caused a chain reaction of explosions that may well have been enough to take out Russia's entire stockpile of Shaheds and warheads. Perhaps a more detailed assessment of the strike's success is forthcoming. For now, another Ukrainian military unit has also confirmed the Donetsk attack was successful. The Kyiv Post reports that Ukraine's Special Operations Forces, or SSO, have also commented on the strike. On the evening of November 5th, Special Operations Forces units carried out a strike on a base used for storing, equipping, and launching Shahed drones in temporarily occupied Donetsk. The enemy's military infrastructure was located on the grounds of the former international airport, the SSO reported. That's the second mention of the Donetsk airport, and it showcases one of Russia's strategies. As the Kyiv Independent reported back in August, Russia is turning vast swathes of occupied Ukraine into giant military bases that it's using to cause further pain to Ukraine. Commercial airports are obvious targets. They already contain hangars, runways, and buildings that could be used as storage facilities, even if those buildings aren't hardened to a military standard. The outlet highlights the Donetsk International Airport as one of its key examples. The airport had actually been derelict for over a decade, according to the Kyiv Independent. That means Russia would have had to put in more work than usual to make the airfield usable as a base. And thanks to satellite images received from Planet Labs, the Kyiv Independent managed to confirm that there had been a build-up on top of the foundations of the old airport months before the Ukraine strike. Whatever Russia built didn't seem to help. And according to the founder of the Ukrainian open-source intelligence project Kiba Boroshno, Vadim Hlushko, that's not exactly surprising. This is the so-called ramshackle infrastructure, garages for storing and launching kamikaze drones of the Shahed type. In addition to the main launch installations, they also set up so-called decoys, fake launch positions and false locations, Hlushko said. The use of the word ramshackle probably tells us everything that we need to know. The base that Ukraine just hit wasn't a full military base. It may well have just been a collection of hastily erected sheds and warehouses that just went up in flames. Ukraine won't care about the type of buildings Russia had built on its disused Donetsk airport. It will care about the up to 1,000 Shaheds and 1,500 warheads that Russia can no longer launch into Ukraine from occupied Donetsk. November 5th was a terrible night for Russia inside occupied Ukraine. But if you thought Ukraine was going to stop with taking out a key Shahed storage facility, you're sorely mistaken. Ukraine hasn't forgotten about the oil refineries against which it spent the last few months launching repeated drone strikes. And on November 6th, it complemented its destruction of Russia's Donetsk Shaheds with yet another refinery strike that will feed into the oil crisis that is raging in Russia. That's according to the Kyiv Independent, which reports that explosions rocked the site of Russia's Volgograd oil refinery, causing several fires in the process. The refinery is one of Russia's largest, as it has a 15.7 million ton refining capacity that makes it responsible for 5.6% of all the refining done inside Russia. Ukraine hasn't just deprived Russia of one of its most vital weapons during the last couple of days, it's also scored yet another blow against Russia's ability to make the gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel the Russian military needs to continue waging Putin's war. The facility Ukraine hit is about 300 miles away from the front lines, the Kyiv Independent reports. And, unlike with the Donetsk strike, Russia has actually commented on this one. The Volgograd regional governor, Andrei Bocharov, has claimed that a 48-year-old civilian has died as a result of Ukraine's refinery strike. This isn't confirmed independently, and as usual, Russia is trying to avoid all mention of the refinery that just went up in flames. Ukraine's refinery strikes are having a major impact on Russia's ability to fight. By early October, some outlets were reporting that Ukraine had knocked out 38% of Russia's refining capacity, the Carnegie Endowment says. August and September saw Ukraine attack 16 of Russia's refineries. Combined, those 16 refineries have an annual maximum capacity of 123 million tons of oil. That's 38% of Russia's total maximum of 327 million tons. But there is a caveat. The 38% figure assumes that all of the plants operate at full capacity and that Ukraine's strikes were enough to shut them down completely. Neither may have been the case, the Carnegie Endowment says, so 38% may be an overestimate. It doesn't really matter. Ukraine's constant refinery strikes have still been enough to put a major dent in Russia's fuel production. That dent is so large that many Russian regions are now dealing with gasoline shortages that are causing price increases and limitations at the pump. The Jamestown Foundation says that Russia's gasoline production fell by almost 25% in September alone, and Ukraine's drone strikes are the reason why. Ukraine has been hitting each individual refinery multiple times, making it hard for Russia to complete repairs as it creaks under the weight of the West's sanctions. So Ukraine delivered a double blow to Russia from November 5th through to November 6th. With its strike on occupied Donetsk, Ukraine took out a huge number of the drones that Russia has been using to hit Ukrainian cities. It followed that up with yet another refinery strike that heaps further misery onto Russia's people, while also causing additional damage to the Russian military. That sounds like a productive couple of days to us. But November 5th in particular was a vital day for Ukraine because Russia had spent so much of 2025 ramping up its Shahed strikes. On November 4th, Sky News offered a roundup of the sheer scale of Russia's drone assaults on Ukraine in 2025. The headline figure is that the number of Shaheds and other drones that Russia has launched at Ukraine during the first 10 months of 2025 is 303% higher than the number it launched during the entirety of 2024. That 303% increase amounts to a total of 44,000 Shahed and Shahed variants launched at Ukraine as of the end of October. More of those drones are hitting their marks too. Ukraine has destroyed 64% of the 2025 drones compared to 68% in 2024. Shaheds have killed at least 494 civilians between January and September, Sky News adds. That shows us that Russia isn't just using its drones to strike military targets, it's purposefully terrorizing Ukraine's citizens and seems more than happy to kill people who aren't fighting in the war. The Kyiv Independent and RBC Ukraine both add that Russia's Shaheds have been getting more dangerous over time. In May, the former reported that Russia's Shaheds are now capable of traveling at speeds of between 380 and 400 kilometers, or about 236 to 248 miles per hour. They're also being equipped with 90-kilogram warheads, meaning they can pack as much as 198 pounds of explosive force. In other words, Russia has been working on upgrades. The increased scale of the country's drone assaults on Ukraine is being compounded by the fact that many of the 2025 drones hit harder than those that Russia was launching in 2024. Toward the end of October, RBC Ukraine highlighted how dangerous these newer Shahed drones are by sharing comments made by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Shaheds have in some cases become more dangerous than ballistic missiles. We can shoot down a ballistic missile, at least in places where we have a Patriot system. But to bring down such a large number of Shaheds flying at such altitudes, we have to use everything, Zelensky claimed. He really means everything too. Interceptor drones, helicopters, F-16s and ground-based air defenses are all part of the Ukrainian toolkit for dealing with Russia's Shaheds. And if things have been bad for much of 2025, the last few months are going to get worse. On November 2nd, Newsweek reported that Russia had launched more than 1,500 drones at Ukraine in the space of a week. The reason why is already clear to anybody who's been paying attention to Russia's winter tactics during the war. Putin wants to knock out as much of Ukraine's energy infrastructure as possible. Again, it's all about causing as much pain to Ukrainian civilians as possible, as Russia hopes that it can leave many of them dealing with blackouts and a lack of heating as Ukraine's freezing cold winter descends. The odds are that the 1,000 Shaheds and 1,500 warheads in Donetsk were going to be part of this winter campaign. After all, occupied Donetsk is the perfect place from which to launch drones that could strike almost any target in Ukraine. The success of Ukraine's attack on Russia's drone storage facility may mean that several of its cities can avoid dealing with the energy crisis that Putin is trying to create. Even a few extra days of electricity and heating could make a lot of difference for the people who no longer have to worry about the Shaheds Ukraine just burned to the ground. Ukraine is more aware than anybody else of how dangerous Russia's Shaheds are. That's why the November 5th strike in Donetsk is just the latest in a multi-month campaign designed to prevent as many of these dangerous drones from launching as possible. As the Kyiv Post points out, Ukraine has been hitting Russia's drone facilities hard since at least July. On July 1st, Ukraine destroyed 4 workshops in the Kupol electromechanical plant in Izhevsk. That plant builds drones, along with air defense systems, so it's pretty clear what Ukraine's goal was. In the Moscow region, Ukraine hit a plant that builds Shahed drones on July 4th. A month or so later, it also hit a storage facility in Tatarstan that provides components Russia uses to build Shaheds. And on August 15th, Ukraine carried out a strike on the Olya seaport that sank an Iranian ship carrying more drone parts that Russia intended to use. The strike on the storage facility in Donetsk wasn't a one-off, it was part of a campaign. Ukraine will be under no illusions about the impact of its attack. As impressive as the strike was, it knows that Russia has thousands more Shaheds in facilities throughout Russia and occupied Ukraine. Perhaps as important as the destruction of the drones is the message that Ukraine delivered to Russia on November 5th. It can now hit Russian drone facilities that lie beyond the front lines. That means any storage buildings that Russia is using are now under threat. With a little luck, Ukraine will be able to hit enough of these types of targets to minimize the impact of Russia's incoming winter hordes. It will have to. After all, Putin has shown many times over that he doesn't care how many of Ukraine's civilians die due to Russia's Shahed drones. As for Ukraine, it's still building on its already very effective deep strike strategy. After months spent targeting Russia's refineries, Ukraine has expanded its scope to start hitting Russia's electricity and energy infrastructure. Russia is being left exposed and outgunned because Ukraine is feeding it a powerful dose of its own medicine. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more videos covering Ukraine's latest successful strikes against Russia. And thank you as always for watching.